We have a big problem in our education system. We're talking to an educator in Texas today, but this applies to all states across the entire union. And we have a problem. We have a problem with students who don't belong in our classrooms, ruining the education experience for everyone else. Teachers don't get paid enough. Students shouldn't have to deal with the kind of violence and disruption that they're experiencing. And parents ultimately are paying tax funds to send their kids off to get a suboptimal educational experience when we have violent individuals who disrupt classes. In a lot of cases, they have these safe spaces that I've learned about where they literally send kids to a padded classroom, a padded room where they can't hurt themselves or anybody else, similar to an insane asylum, and we can't kick them out of schools. The administrative process in our schools, we're talking about Texas today, we're talking to a Texas educator, but like I said, across our entire nation, it's broken. Libs of TikTok posted a post the other day and it said students at Ross S. Sterling High School are protesting against their school district demanding justice after 16-year-old Andrew Meismer was stabbed to death during class. Students claim that Andre Matthews, who was charged with Andrew's murder, had a history of disciplinary action which the school repeatedly ignored. There's a lot to break down here. So we're going to jump into this with a guy who is going to remain anonymous. I'm going to have his screen blacked or put a silhouette up there of some sort. But this individual does not want retaliation from his administration, and he has a lot to talk about. This is somebody who has dealt with this for years and knows the inner workings of what's going on and how broken things are. So I'm going to introduce him as Coach. And Coach, welcome to the show.
Sam, thanks for having me on, man. I
Yeah,
appreciate it.
absolutely. So tell us what you can about your situation and maybe a little bit that's not too identifying, but what's going on.
Yeah, no, Sam, it is. You hit the nail on the head. Education is in crisis mode. And I don't think that's going to be a shock to anyone of your listeners that we're in full on crisis mode right now. But that's where we are. And it's a sad reality because what happens in education when we get in crisis mode is kids suffer. Kids suffer. And so some of the key ways that we're seeing that in our schools today start with one. I mean, it's the need to the legal requirement to educate illegal aliens. That is one of the biggest issues in schools today. We have in Texas, we're I think somewhere in the 500,000 range of students who are illegally in this country, and it costs the state $13.5 billion a year to educate these individuals. These are taxpayer funds going to students who most of the time don't speak English, they speak their native language, and take a lot of resources in the classroom. They take the teacher's time, space, and attention because there's not enough ESL support, English as a second language support, to support these students. And what ends up happening is our native students end up suffering, and the education space gets slowed down as we take extra time to educate these individuals who don't speak our language. So
So
that,
let me
yeah,
interject really quick. You said, just to recap that, you said 500,000 illegal alien students and approximately 13.5 billion. Did you say $billion?
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And
With a
and just to
B.
put this in context for people, we have an overwhelming majority of Texans right now who are decrying school property taxes in the state of Texas, literally collapsing our system. And $13.5 billion of school property taxes are going to pay for 500,000 illegal alien students. That
Yep.
right there is the fix. That's the fix. If nothing else is done, that right there would fix the system.
Yep. Yep. There's 50,000 in the DFW Metroplex alone to kind of paint the picture of some of the major hotspot issues. Austin has about, we believe, about the same. Houston, your major metroplexes are somewhere in the 50,000 range per metroplex alone. And so the issue becomes we as educators right now in the public space, educators are being painted as the villain. And especially in conservative circles, and being a conservative myself, I understand why that picture is being painted. I understand how it can be construed that way. But what I really want your listeners to understand in red states, a majority of teachers are actually conservatives. They're fighting an uphill battle against upper level administration and government who doesn't care. So when we talk about the illegal immigrant issue, what ended up happening there is we ended up having a Supreme Court case called Plyler versus Doe. That is when the Supreme Court had federal overreach. The Supreme Court ruled that states have to oh, educate illegal immigrants in their community, every child in their community. As we know, there's nothing in the Constitution that talks about education. And we know that the Constitution also mandates that anything not explicitly stated in the Constitution is a state right. So for the Supreme Court to make that ruling, it was a liberal majority at the time. I believe now if red states went into the Supreme Court, it would be overruled just because it's not constitutional and it's a legal ruling. But it really is up to the states to start pushing back on this federal overreach we're seeing. Because again, we want to talk about where we get these violent offenders. You just mentioned the libs of TikTok. And a fun note on that, an interesting note on that, a parent from that district just claimed that the school denied bus transportation services to their student who was a part of the walkout protest at the end of the semester.
Oh, really?
That is, a parent wrote a Facebook post in response to the superintendent, who has gone on to say that the district doesn't need to tell anybody why this student was still in the classroom. But Sam, this isn't the first time we've seen it in Texas, unfortunately.
No,
We
no,
saw
it's
it
not.
just this past spring at a track meet, where a student of a similar background take a disciplinary history that you could roll from the front door of the school through the back door of the school. That student brings a weapon with them to a school event and murders another student. And
Yep,
this is
I recall
happening
that.
all across the state.
That was Carmelo Anthony, a then 17-year-old student at Frisco Centennial High School, was arrested and charged in the murder of Austin Metcalf, 17 and 11th grader at Frisco, who police said was stabbed during an altercation in the bleachers at the meet. Yeah, I think we all remember
Yeah.
that one.
And
That was a big deal.
that happened in Frisco. That's a pretty affluent community.
Sure.
I mean, it's going across socioeconomic bounds. It's going across even some racial bounds. One of the biggest problems I would say in our school today, we have a huge drug problem in schools. And so I know I'm kind of bouncing all over the place, and
No,
that's
you're good.
definitely not intentional, but I think it's hopefully can paint this picture of what all issues public educators are actually seeing. And so talking about drug issues, one student that I've had in class in the past brought a felony amount of weed into the classroom. She had multiple containers in a purse, and by the time that it was turned into administration, it got turned over, and I was told I was not allowed to talk to any law enforcement about the issue at hand. The student was in my class the very next day. I mean, just
I don't even know what to
absolutely
say to that.
insane.
Yeah, that's you commit a felony and you're just back to business as usual.
Yes.
What did your
So,
administration say to you? What was their excuse?
well, according to the student, it wasn't her weed, which I take a bigger issue with. And the reason I take a bigger issue with that is if it's not your weed, it begs the question, whose weed is it and are they looking for it? Because if they're looking for it
True.
and they don't understand you have it, now I have 30 students' lives in my classroom that are endangered. And as we've seen, my school doesn't have metal detectors. There's a lot of openings into the school. Most high schools in Texas are going to have upwards of 40 or 50 entry exit ones. So anyone can get into those schools. We try to make them as safe as possible, but anyone can get into that school with a student walking by that lets them in, not thinking about it, or whatever the case may be. And now I have 30 students whose lives are in danger because you have somebody's weed and you don't even know who they are. I'm
Wow.
pretty sure if she gets pulled over on the street and she has a felony level of weed, whether it's hers or not, she's getting criminally charged for possession. And so schools are
Right.
acting like
Watch any
this
cop
force
video of
field.
somebody getting pulled over. I mean, that's reality.
Right, right. Schools are acting like a force field that allows illegal criminal behavior. And people are like, well, it's not just kids being kids. No, This
No.
isn't the 1980s. You have a one-off fight in the hallway and that's it. This is a legal criminal behavior that we see in the Department of Corrections. This is the behavior we're seeing, and what we see is we see it translate into the real world, right? So it just popped up. It went viral. There was a fight at the Texas High School State Championship game. Just teenagers just waylaying into each other, just a massive brawl, probably in the 30 to 40 person range.
Oh, that came out today, right?
It Yeah, it's been circulating slowly, but I think it's
Okay.
finally caught some major wind as of recent,
Yeah, it was
of just these.
pandemonium. It was a zoo. It was just people, like you said, it was like 30 people just swinging haymakers and absolute insanity across a huge area where
Mhm.
nobody was getting through and nobody was controlling that. I don't care how many security guards you had in the area; they were not going to put an end to that in a coherent way. I mean, it was complete insanity. I'll have to post a link to that video
Right,
with
but
this podcast.
that is not uncommon of a hallway in a major size Texas high school. I'm talking our 5 and 6A high schools. That would not be an uncommon thing to see.
Really, I mean,
Where it
just complete
starts out,
pandemonium. People breaking down and just dozens of kids swinging off and hitting each other.
yes, yeah, yeah. It starts as a one on one, and now you've befriended somebody's friend, and now that friend's involved. And all of a sudden, before we know it, we have 20 to 30 students involved in a fight. Right now, our schools, they're too big. I mean, think about it. You have 30 students in a classroom. There's a video that just popped up of a Texas high school classroom, which really begs the question, how are they getting video out of this classroom? Because phones are supposed to be illegal in this state, but I can tell you in most districts it's not happening. They're not
Right.
following state law. But this video comes out, this poor teacher gets absolutely run over, just run over. She's in the middle of two 14, 15, 16-year-old males going at it. Just complete pandemonium in classrooms, hallways. They're just too big. And what is a single teacher supposed to do, especially a female teacher, against two teenage males who are pent up and ready to fight each other?
But yeah, you're going to get destroyed. I mean, no question about it. That's unsaid. And how much does a teacher make in Texas? Give me a median salary.
Now, I believe the median salary right now is around $60,000 with the state minimum, meaning a minimum a district has to pay a first year teacher is $38,000.
That's nuts. Okay, and tell me how many hours a teacher works on average if they have a full size classroom and they have to deal with uh, teaching plus grading and all of the extracurricular stuff. How many hours would a teacher expect to work for $60,000?
Yeah, Sam, I mean, we can see somewhere in the 60 to 80 hour a week range. That comes from lesson planning, that comes from grading. You have to document everything, right? So you have a student who cusses you out in class, that's the documentation. You have a student who lets you know they've hurt themselves or someone at home's hurting them. You, the teacher in that classroom who have heard that, are in charge of the CPS. You have SPED documentation, 504 documentation, right? And so we have to do all these things. The expectation right now in classrooms is that teachers differentiate to every student in class. So if you have 30 students in class, most high school teachers are teaching 5 to 6 periods a day or 5 to 6 periods on their schedule. That's 180 students, and you are somehow supposed to teach to 180 students. That can be a special education student. That can be a GT student who's taking on level classes. That can be our wonderful illegal student population who doesn't speak English. That can be 504, which most people don't even know about 504. It's accommodations for just about any. We talk about the libs of TikTok where that student goes off and kills that student. Some of the reason he's back in the classroom is his 504 accommodations. Well, he has anger management problems. So instead of suspending him, we need to X, Y, and Z. There's actually a report that came out the other day. Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana, hold on to your pants now. Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana are leading the country in post pandemic literacy levels, meaning they have surpassed or met where they were post pandemic. Why? Two reasons. They went back to phonics based education and they reinstated discipline in the classroom. There's no more, well, we're not
Wow.
suspending this student because of this. No, no, no. If you are violent, you're out in those three states. We look at
Imagine that.
Maslow's hierarchy of need, right? Maslow's hierarchy of need states that if you don't have your basic physical safety needs met, you cannot do anything above those first two levels. So if students are coming into class and they're worried about somebody cussing out their teacher, they're worried about somebody cussing them out, they're worried about being fought, they're worried about drugs being in school, they're worried about weapons being in school. How on earth can any of them focus on education when they're worried about all those other things? Maslow's would tell us that's impossible.
True story. It is an untenable environment that is destroying the not just the future of these individual students, but the future of this country. Because the same kind of administrative process that you're talking about that refuses to kick these kids out of class is also refusing to not flunk these kids, and it's graduating them. Explain that.
Correct. Yeah, the more liberal pockets are. You probably are seeing it in blue states. That's probably happening. So I'm not going to say it's not happening on the teacher's own accord, but what I will say, majority of teachers aren't doing it. Where that's all coming from, that's coming from upper level administration. Most teachers don't want to do DEI and don't want to do LGBT theory because it makes their life harder. You're already expected to teach to 30 students in a classroom at a time, 180 students throughout the school year. Now you have to worry about somebody's pronouns, somebody's preferred name, somebody's gender and race background and land acknowledgments and all the extra crap. We don't have the mental capacity for that. Any of that that's happening, I would say 85 to 90% of that's coming from administrative directives. This is what you need to do to make every student feel valued in your classroom. I actually had a student a couple of years ago, I sent the student out of the classroom for cussing. And they were like, I'm going to fight you. So I send them out of the classroom, write them up. They're back in my classroom not even 10 minutes later. They get sent straight back.
Even I didn't. I
So
mean, even I had to go to the principal's office for the rest of the period if I was disruptive. You don't get back in
at,
there in 10 minutes. That's insane.
at least, right? And the worst part is I had to stop class to write a referral immediately. So that means 28 other students are suffering, losing learning, right?
Yeah.
So I go and
Right.
I write that referral, and they claim to just not see the referral. Then I get told the reason that you're being cussed out by kids, the reason kids are threatening to fight you is because you're not a good relationship. You're not meeting them where they're at. Now, I
Stop.
am a traditionalist through and through. I grew up in a household where I was more worried about what was fixing to happen when I got home, which I think was starting to go out of style in the early 2000s when I was in school. There was never an excuse to cuss out an adult.
No, no. You're not only getting it at school, but when you get home, you're getting it
Yeah,
from your dad too for embarrassing them. That's right.
right. I mean, they could have cussed me out. They could have done, I mean, they would have had to come up short of physically laying a hand on me for there to be any justification and me making negative comments back. The expectation is I would have gone home, I would have let my parents know what happened. They would have asked me first, well, what did you do to provoke the
Right.
situation?
Right. What did you do?
And I wouldn't have wanted to
Yes.
give that answer, and that would have been the end of that.
Right.
Nowadays, the question becomes, well, what did you as the teacher do to make that student? I don't know. Maybe they're overstimulated from the reckless lawlessness happening in the hallways. That's when I see a majority of my issues happen. The first 10 minutes to the last 10 minutes of class, you literally see these students get in this fight or flight mode as they're about to hit the hallways. Because when things
Understandably.
go down, more times than not, it's in the hallway. Right, right. It's psychology.
Yeah. I would be in fight or flight mode too if I was in those hallways. I'm a grown man.
Yes.
But
Yep.
goodness, like the fights I have seen on video and what I have been told by teachers who have been in these situations, holy crap, I'd be going into a war zone every time I left the classroom. There is no
Yes.
education when you're constantly afraid of I mean, forget getting stuffed in your locker or having somebody push you in the back. You're talking about beyond just getting clobbered. You're talking now about getting knifed or even potentially shot. Like that is the expectation that a lot of these students have in these bigger schools when they go out into the classrooms.
Yeah, no,
Mind-boggling.
that's absolutely correct. Unfortunately, I mean, I would argue to say, actually, I read from somebody the other day that their spouse left a public school to go teach in the Department of Corrections
Yeah. Yeah.
because it's
Right.
safer in the Department of Corrections. You know, there's no weapons in there, or their access to weapons is limited. They have to get really creative to get a weapon. If they are out of line, they're removed from the education setting. So if we think about this, there's less drugs, less weapons running through school prisoners who are taking educational courses, and it's easier to remove them from the education setting. It's not like they're
Correct.
going anywhere else. They're in the jail. They're
Yep.
just removed from the education setting so that everybody else can learn.
I know who you're
It,
talking about. I saw that post, and that's from a guy who's currently a Pentagon reporter. But
yeah,
he I talked to him in my DMs, and he broke down that whole process for me. And yeah, the sad reality is that prisoners in federal penitentiary are more compliable and less dangerous to their educators than our public education grade schools are
yep,
currently.
yep,
Think about
yep.
that. That's insane. So
It's yeah, no, it's out of control.
let me ask you this: your experience. What have you done as far as filing grievances or trying to protest some of this stuff going on, and what has been told to you or done to you as a result of that?
Yeah, so 3 years ago, I filed a grievance against an administrator who was, first of all, told me I was breaking the law when that administrator themselves did not know the law. It was a real shame. They told me you're breaking education code, you're breaking federal law. And when we did the research, when I called TEA, when I called the representative body
For
that I pay each year,
reference, just really
mhm,
quick, TEA is the Texas Education Agency, just so people know. Keep going.
correct.
Sorry.
And I have a fun story about them at the end of this.
Okay.
But I asked them, I said, is this illegal? No, that's actually common practice across the entire state. So we have this interaction. I tell this person, hey, it's not illegal. This administrator emails me back maybe 15 minutes later. You treated me like a dog. You rose up like you were going to strike me down. We read through this email, we go back, we look at all of the documentation we have in this process. There is no time, it's on camera, there's no time where I am physically over her. There is no time where I raise a hand up as if I'm going to strike her. I just told this administrator, you need to leave the education environment because there are students here. And you're making a deal about this in front of students. That's not acceptable. Let's schedule a time where you can explain to me what the policy is at this school. That is the only part of the conversation that happened. Unfortunately, this administrator wasn't going away. She tried to get me in trouble on campus. So I ended up having to ask 14 to 18-year-olds to give me student witness statements. I'm having to get statements from kids on how an adult acted in a classroom. Unfortunately, I come to find out this administrator, this is not their first time having agreements filed against them. They've been moved from 4 different campuses, each time because a teacher filed a grievance against that individual
Can they
for the
not be fired?
same conduct. They won't be. They won't be. Administrators take up arms for each other. They take care of each other. It's a well-known thing teachers talk about all the time. I wonder who they stabbed in the back to get their job.
Right.
Unfortunately,
This is a
and they
perfect time to interject, by the way, and say that the number that I read is 80% of education costs go to administrative costs in the state of Texas. 80%. So
Yes, I'm working with a guy who's running for governor of Texas, Doc Pete Chambers. He has a huge, huge ambition for Texas education and public education policy, retaking the classroom, getting rid of violent individuals. But one of the things we saw, average budget in a school district in the 80s, 60, 70, 80s, when we were the most successful in education in the entire world, that administrator budget was somewhere between 4 to 6%. Nowadays, we're seeing
Wow.
somewhere between 13 and 18%. Almost one fifth of budgets for school districts go to administrators who will never interact with a student.
And that doesn't include the TEA or anything else, does it? That's a whole
No,
different
no,
add-on?
yeah,
Okay,
no,
yeah, that's what I thought.
that is per district. That's for an individual district.
Gotcha. And with that, understand that there are approximately 1,207 districts in the state of Texas, and each one of those
Mhm.
districts, it could be a district that has a ton of students or as little as 500 students. And the number I'm looking at here is statewide median for superintendents in a district in Texas is $150,000 to $170,000. And that could be for a district as little as 500 students. And then top earners can exceed 300,000 with some reaching over $500,000, $500,000 to be a superintendent, which you can make that argument if they had tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of students, whatever the case is that they deal with uh, they deal with enough that they earn that kind of money. But there is no world where you can say that somebody overseeing 500 students in their district can make $150,000 and that makes sense. That's insane. While a teacher who is working 60 to 80 hours a week is making $60,000 plus dealing with all of the stress and chaos of the violence and disruption and everything else they're dealing with in their school.
Yeah, I mean, if you
Blows my
think
mind.
about it, if we do $500,000 to a superintendent, or even three or $400,000, that means they're earning somewhere between one and $300,000 more than the president of the United States.
Right. So let me take that back then and say that no superintendent anywhere deserves to make 500,000 or anywhere close to that number. You're
Well,
right.
here's
You're
the
right.
worst part. They'll get put on these big contracts too, multi-year contracts. And that's supported by school boards who are voted on. Unfortunately, we see low voter turnout for school board elections. And not only is that an issue, but we see low school board participation. There's just people don't have time and they don't have the means to run for a school board position. You have to pay to file for your spot. You have to pay to run a campaign. People don't have, the average American doesn't have the money, the finances to put away for a campaign for
You're right.
school. And so what's happening is these people are all making backroom deals with the superintendents. We see a lot of these ed tech companies, we see a lot of vendors in the education space who make these underneath the table deals with these superintendents. And so now the superintendent's not only earning $300, $400, $500,000. The school board members aren't already wealthy. They're becoming wealthier because of these under the table deals. Adding on to the superintendent problem, a lot of them get their car paid for, their house paid for, their cell phone paid for, their insurance paid for. Whereas teachers are
Really.
paying 180, $200 a month for insurance. Oh yeah.
That's
Yeah. No, their benefits package is insane. And actually them getting fired is almost about as good as a Division I head football coach getting fired. There was a superintendent recently fired, and this superintendent walked away with $1 million was the exit agreement.
how does that make sense? $1 million as a severance package.
Yep. For a district that is failing, that failed consistently under their.
Yeah, keep in mind, Texas is 40th in the nation in education.
Yep.
40th. We are the 8th largest economy in the world, and we are the 40th state in the union in education. And a guy is walking away from a failing district with $1 million severance package. I can't say enough stupid things to, you know, really express my emotions about how angry that makes me. That's
Yeah.
mind boggling, man.
We also, the state spends 90 million, almost $100 million a year on the STAR test, another administrative expense. We're creating our own test when there's tests already out there that we could buy and give us a better understanding of where we match up against the rest of the country. But we pay $90 million a year, and the Texas state legislature just amended the STAR test to become a 3-time-a-year test that will now cost 3 times as much. So we're going to be in the $270,000 to $300,000 range for a test given to students. When it's funny, you look around the entire world, you look at Japan, you look at the Nordic countries who do such a great job with education. None of them standardize tests when we do. None of them standardize tests at the young age as we do. None of them standardize tests near as much as we do, even when they do start standardized testing. I have lost this school year 4 weeks to standardized testing.
Say that again?
I have lost 4 weeks of curriculum
Oh,
education
a
time
whole
for
month.
standardized tests. A whole month
Wow. Wow.
from the star retest to benchmarks to practice star tests to, I mean, you name it, the list goes on. There's one that the name's even escaping me right now. There's Pass. I mean, most Texas citizens haven't even heard of every test that these kids have to take. And I tell them every time, I said, listen, guys, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that you are having to experience this because this is not education. This is not teaching. This is not learning. This is not your fault either. We have adults who aren't making appropriate decisions for the betterment of your future
The
because these kids
administrators
come
are
in look just so sad. They look so sad and stressed out because they're so overtexted.
yeah. Yeah, it's unconscionable when you think about the fact that it's not bettering them in terms of learning and preparing them for their future. It's you have administrators that are destroying the future of these individual students, the future of the state, and the future of the nation. They are pushing violent, undisciplined individuals out into the workforce who probably won't get a job, at least not a job of any kind of worth, just simply because of their behavior. But there are no consequences for them. They have no they have no structure implemented in them. They know nothing about cause and effect, nothing. And and who ultimately suffers the most from it? It's the ones who keep their mouth shut and they're there to do what they're supposed to do. And they have to get this subpar education and get this subpar experience. And then in the meantime, be afraid for their life because of how violent it is. You know, going back to what we started talking about at the beginning with this individual who stabbed this other kid to death. I don't think we talked about it, but it's important to bring up that everyone came out to include parents, teachers, and students, the students who protested and said, we told you about this guy. We all
Yeah.
did. Everybody in the community, parents, teachers, students, everybody was saying that this kid is a problem kid. And there's an alleged social media post from this kid. I can't prove that it's his, but there's an alleged social media post of him bragging about it, him showing a
Yeah.
screenshot of his discipline record and him writing a little thing over it, just laughing about it. Like that's the environment we have. We have kids who know that the system is hamstrung,
Yeah.
know that that nobody's going to do anything to them unless they literally murder somebody and then okay, now we'll deal with it. But the damage is already done, and they can go to school every day and be a disruptive force. They can bring drugs. They can make other students and teachers' lives hell, and nothing will be done to them.
Yeah.
That is how broken our country and our entire education system is. And the fact that those three states you mentioned, those are typically the states we clown on. I think that's why you brought it up
Right.
in humor, but those are typically the
Yeah.
states we clown on
Oh,
for
no
being
doubt.
dum-dums. And and yet they're the ones leading the way on correcting this by kicking these disruptive individuals out of their classrooms. And yet
Yeah.
Texas, the alleged big air quotes here, reddest state in the union, is failing, demonstrably failing at protecting our students and educating our students in the classroom
Yeah.
while
No,
paying our
absolutely.
teachers sub rate pay.
Well, it's funny
That's
when I was
crazy.
going through that grievance process, I called TEA to kind of check out the rule that this lady said I was breaking, and I'm talking to the guy, and I'm like, "So I want to know." He goes, "What?" I asked him. I said, she's claiming this is illegal, but I feel like the school's not coming through on their end of following the state rule." And you just said it's commonplace. So let's say I want to come back and be like, hey, y'all are actually the ones breaking the rule. Who do I talk to? Oh, well, we don't do that. Okay, y'all don't do that, but y'all are the Texas Education Agency. Yeah, but the legislator made that law. So who enforces it? Well, the districts do. Okay, well, the districts are supposed to be enforcing it, but what if they're not?
What if they're
Well, then
not?
the legislature is supposed to enforce it.
I
No
mean,
lawmaker's going to come into our school. Said, so what do y'all do? He goes, we're worried about it, state attendance, because there's an official state attendance time that every school has to take, and that's how schools get their funding. However many butts are in chairs. You want to talk about a broken system? Now we're forcing kids to come to school sick. Now we're forcing, you want to talk about why we're not going to out of school suspend a kid or put them on long term suspension? Their butt in a seat equals dollar signs for that school. So they're worried about that, is what he told me. They're worried about teacher certification and they're worried about the standardized tests. And that's what they do. I'm like, that's like 5% of schools. What do you mean that's all y'all do? He goes, well, that's all we're really in charge of. We don't have jurisdiction outside of that. So no
then
one
what
has
is the
jurisdiction
purpose of
over
the
Texas
TEA?
schools.
Right. No
I couldn't tell
legislator. I
you.
mean, it's a completely flawed process. No
Yeah.
legislator out there is going to enforce the law. That is not their purpose.
Yeah.
Uh,
It's sad. Mike Morath has been appointed. It actually got changed in the 80s to where Texas moved from an elected commissioner of education to an appointed one by the governor, which is just a real shame. It really is. Um, Honestly, this is a hot take. I think a liberal would be a great person in that role because a lot of times they do care about the phonics based and a lot of your academia. And then our red legislature would be like, yeah, but you're not going to do the DEI, you're not going to do the LGBT, you're not going to do all this CRT. So I think it would actually be a really nice medium for our legislator to be like, yeah, you're not doing all that extra crap, but you know academia pretty well. So why don't you help us out with some of the academia pieces? But moving back to an elected commissioner, Mike Morath's been in this role all 3 terms of Greg Abbott's tenure as governor. State scores have only fallen, drastically fallen. When we look at COVID bounce back, Texas is one of the lowest states scoring wise on COVID post pandemic bounce back in the country. And nothing gets better under Morath. We recklessly spend. Star scores get worse. In our students' defense, they've released some of the past star tests. They'll ask questions on a like world geography benchmark or U.S. history test that has nothing to do with U.S. history at all. Like they'll ask just these random questions out of the blue. I really believe it's to help kind of push the voucher program that Jeff Yoss and Greg Abbott worked hard to build. What a lot of Texas taxpayers don't know is when they pass the voucher legislation, it sounds great in theory. We're going to help these impoverished families go to private school. They need to flee public schools. And quite frankly, I don't think we can I don't completely disagree. I think private school is a great option for a lot of people. The one thing is, as we see in government all the time, whoever they give money to, they become in charge of. Another issue we're seeing nationally is 93% of people using vouchers were already in private schools. And
yeah.
so it's not helping new families. It's a tax break essentially for families who could already afford private school education. We're seeing major Islamic schools pop up all over the place. Florida, it's really bad right now. They're having schools that are Islam based pop up everywhere, and no one can stop them because it's First Amendment. Islam's not a terrorist group yet, hasn't been deemed a terrorist group, so they have the right to start Islamic schools and have vouchers go to them. I mean, we just have a whole kind of ordeal that's happening with the vouchers, but I bring that up because Greg Abbott, when he pushed vouchers and he would literally bring lawmakers into his office and say, if you don't vote yes on this, I am vetoing every piece of policy you put in front of me. I literally had a state representative from West Texas be like, Abbott brought me into his office, sat me down, and he said, all this gun right legislation, all this stuff you're doing to help with gun rights, if you don't vote yes on school vouchers, I'll veto all of your stuff, all your legislative pieces. So
That sounds right.
Texans love the Second Amendment, but unfortunately, we have lawmakers who had their hands tied behind their back. I either vote for school vouchers and lose all these great legislative pieces for the Second Amendment, or I vote no and risk Texans losing their Second Amendment right. And so he bullied the legislature into doing it so he could bolster his friend. His friend is Jeff Yoss, both part, I believe, of the World Economic Forum. If I'm not mistaken, I believe they both had ties to that. But Jeff Yoss runs the Odyssey Group, who coincidentally got the bid for private school vouchers. His Odyssey Group has never done vouchers before. And now all of a sudden are going to get, I believe it's $100 million in private school vouchers. And they're going to be the ones managing it for the state of Texas. Trace the money trail and you
Wow.
kind of get to see why we pass vouchers in Texas. And really, if they haven't been able to help public schools at all, do we really want them touching private schools at all? Because it's not
Right.
going to be a no strings attached situation. They're going to get say in private schools. They haven't done anything great with public schools in 12 years. Are they really going to start now?
No, that's a great point, and, I don't know, you said a mouthful there, but, yeah, that sounds about right with Greg Abbott, and that's similar to how he, that's similar to how he dealt with sheriffs in Texas with the
Mhm.
emergency state funding and the 190 all of the different areas, I can't quote an exact number, so I won't, but all the different areas that are still under emergency, statewide control, and I've talked to a handful of sheriffs who have told me, "We don't go against Abbott because he controls the purse, and if we want any
Right.
of that money, we do what he says." And so you have a guy who's dictating through legislature and is not putting an honest foot forward for Texans. You talked about his ties to the WEF and just uh, the global ties he's connected Texas to the rest of the world. And yeah, great. The economy is huge, but Texans are suffering because of it. Texans are
Mhm.
suffering under sky high property taxes, under the burden of 500,000 illegal immigrant students, just the students,
Uh, just the students.
$18.5 billion. And then just the widespread crime that is going on in our schools where teachers
Mm.
have no recourse and no method of getting a student removed from the class unless they actually commit a violent crime where another student gets harmed or like we saw gets killed, and then they'll do
Yeah.
something about it.
Yeah.
Everything is backwards.
Yeah, yeah. And I know as we're getting ready to wind down, I would just encourage my encouragement to parents would be stay involved. The reason it's gotten out of control as it has, is not because of the good parents and the involved parents. It's because the parents who don't care what their kid does and who treat our public schools like a babysitting service, those parents are the first ones in the door when their kid has to serve a suspension or isn't going to pass a class. I know that a lot of the good parents are working jobs. I know a lot of them, both parents are working jobs so they can afford to live in Texas, to afford to live in a nicer district. Continue to make your voice heard. Tell the legislator they're wrong in administering the STAR test. Tell the legislature that if it's a criminal activity on the street, it's a criminal activity in a school building. Hold your administrators accountable. Ask your teachers, trusted teachers, what they see on their campus level, because there are good schools out there, and we need to support those schools, but we also need to call out the evil that's being done. Really, I mean, it's evil. The enemy, I prayed right before we started this podcast. I said, Lord, just use my words to let Texans hear what they need to hear. Let me be a let me take this opportunity to shine a light in the darkness, because when light comes to darkness, darkness can't overtake it. So would we
Amen.
just mobilize as Texans? Would we mobilize as believers to protect the innocence of our young people, to educate our young people so they know right from wrong, to educate our young people to think critically, to educate our young people to not be able to take a standardized test, but to be the future leaders of tomorrow. We have an obligation as the adults of Texas to protect our young people. And I would just encourage families to engage and embrace their public schools. Fight for what's right. Don't let what the superintendent in Goose Creek right now is getting away. Don't let him get away with that. Telling people that he doesn't have to answer. No, he is a public servant getting paid six figures a year. He better answer when a student dies in his classroom, when there were obvious warning signs and students, parents, and teachers asked for recourse towards that student. Y'all have more power. Teachers can complain all day, but as I've seen in my situation, they're going to have whistleblower retaliation. They're going to create witch hunts to try to get you out of the classroom. they're not going to listen to teachers. They're going to listen when you step up and speak. We need to have our voices rise against the silent minority who wants our school buildings to be a place of chaos. And chaos is of the enemy. Jesus is of peace, right? Jesus gives the peace that surpasses all understanding, and the enemy creates chaos that surpasses all understanding. And so if you see chaos in your school, that is the enemy. I would encourage you to go pray over that school, pray over your teachers, and let's get hand in hand, hip to hip, and fight for the future of our state and the future of our country. I mean, our kids need you now.
Brother, that was profound, truly. And I hope that message does go out to all Texans as well as all citizens of the United States. Um, I won't even try to follow up on that because what you said was nail on the head. That was profound. Uh, Coach, that was great. I hope a lot of people see this. I'm going to get as many clips out there as possible, but what you've highlighted and what you've brought to the forefront needs to be known by every citizen who is paying taxes and every single person who has a student in school. You need to get involved. It, I mean, the future of this nation is on the line, and it starts with our youth and in the education system. You have to get involved. I appreciate you for coming on, man. Any last words?
And I appreciate you. Yeah, like I just go back to it, echo it. Our kids need you. Our teachers need you. We're going to fight for a better future. And man, to all the listeners who took time to listen to this, I appreciate y'all's investment in the future of our country. It's darkness is here, but as soon as light enters, it overcomes the darkness. So let's go fight.
Amen. All right. Until next time, I am Sam. I'll talk to you later. See ya.